In the grand theatre of human civilization, few rivalries have shaped the modern world, quite like that of India and China. Two ancient civilizations born from the same cradle of history now race toward the pinnacle of global power. But as the winds of change sweep across Asia, something extraordinary is happening. In the year 2026, India, long underestimated, often overlooked, begins to leap beyond the shadows. This is not a mere story of economics or technology. It is a story of resilience, adaptation, and the indomitable spirit of a billion souls rising with purpose. While China faces the tremors of its own making, India prepares for its greatest transformation yet, a leap that could redefine the future of our planet. The turning point was not marked by a single event, but by a gradual awakening that had been building for decades within the heart of India. Beneath the noise of global headlines, a quiet revolution was taking place. One not born in boardrooms or bureaucratic chambers, but in the restless energy of its people. For years, India had been seen as a follower, a service hub, a back office to the world. Yet, as 2026 dawned, the world began to witness a nation stepping boldly into a role it had long been preparing for. The transformation was not accidental. It was the culmination of determination, policy evolution, and a newfound confidence in India's own potential. The roots of this turning point can be traced to the early 2020s, when India began investing heavily in its innovation ecosystem. A surge of startups emerged, not just in cities like Bengaluru or Hyderabad, but across second- and third-tier towns. Innovation was no longer the privilege of the elite. It became a national movement. Government initiatives and private ventures worked hand in hand to empower the youth, support risk-takers, and build an infrastructure where creativity could thrive. India's technology sector, already robust, began expanding into new frontiers: artificial intelligence, green energy, biotechnology, and space technology. While the world had long admired India's prowess in software and digital services, what truly changed the game was its shift from consumption to creation. Indian entrepreneurs stopped merely adapting global models and started crafting solutions uniquely tailored to India's diverse landscape. From agritech platforms that revolutionized rural economies to fintech innovations that democratized access to finance, India's inventors began solving problems that even the most advanced economies struggled with. This shift from imitation to innovation became the defining feature of India's leap. Parallel to this, a transformation unfolded in India's governance mindset. Bureaucratic red tape, once a major obstacle, was slowly being replaced by efficiency and accountability. Digital governance initiatives brought transparency to systems that had long been opaque. The introduction of platforms for public feedback, real-time monitoring of government schemes, and massive digitization efforts bridged the gap between citizens and institutions. For the first time, millions of Indians felt like active participants in their nation's progress rather than passive recipients of policy. The private sector, too, began to evolve. Indian corporations started moving beyond their domestic ambitions, merging their deep understanding of local markets with a global outlook. Venture capital began flowing into industries that were once dismissed as unscalable. Indian companies were no longer just competing, they were leading, setting trends, exporting innovation, and attracting global partnerships. The confidence in Made in India transformed into belief in designed in India. And this change in narrative became a matter of national pride. Education, often considered the backbone of any economy, also underwent a silent revolution. The rigid structures of rote learning gave way to dynamic models emphasizing creativity, problem-solving, and digital fluency. Skill development programs linked directly to industry needs ensured that the upcoming generation was ready not just to find jobs, but to create them. The marriage of academia, industry, and government policy built a foundation that fueled an unstoppable cycle of innovation and opportunity. As the rest of the world grappled with inflation, aging populations, and economic stagnation, India's vast, young, and ambitious demographic began driving its engines of growth. The optimism of the youth became the nation's most powerful currency. The rise of Tier-2 and Tier-3 cities as innovation hubs diversified India's economic geography, reducing dependence on traditional metropolitan centers and spreading prosperity more evenly across the country. This period also marked a psychological transformation. India stopped waiting for validation from the West. Instead, it began charting its own course, rooted in its culture, shaped by its realities, and driven by its people. The turning point was not about outpacing another nation. It was about realizing its own latent potential, about discovering that the power to lead the next era of human progress did not come from mimicry, but from authenticity, adaptability, and unity of purpose. India's demographic advantage stands as one of the most powerful forces shaping its ascent in 2026. With a population exceeding 1.4 billion, more than half under the age of 30. India possesses something few nations can claim: a vast, youthful, and energetic workforce ready to transform potential into performance. While much of the developed world faces an aging crisis, shrinking labor pools, and the weight of welfare costs, India stands at the threshold of a demographic dividend unlike any other in modern history. But what truly defines this moment is not just the number of young people. It is the mindset that this generation carries, the hunger to achieve, the impatience for progress, and the boldness to dream beyond traditional boundaries. This youthful dynamism has become India's most valuable resource. Across cities, towns, and villages, the energy of the young pulses through every industry, from technology to agriculture, from manufacturing to entertainment. They are not content with routine or repetition. They seek disruption, armed with smartphones, global connectivity, and education. Millions of young Indians are now part of a digital revolution that has collapsed distances and democratized access to opportunity. Through online platforms, they learn new skills, launch small businesses, and collaborate with peers across continents. The Internet has become India's new university and marketplace, nurturing a generation that learns fast, adapts faster, and refuses to be left behind. The government's focus on skill development has further amplified this momentum. Initiatives aimed at upskilling millions through technical institutes, vocational centers, and digital learning programs have bridged the gap between ambition and ability. India's youth are no longer waiting for traditional employment structures to absorb them. They are creating their own ecosystems of innovation and enterprise. The rise of start-up culture, supported by government incentives and private investment, has given young entrepreneurs a platform to turn their ideas into impact. In small towns once known only for agriculture, Co-working spaces now buzz with coders, designers, and inventors crafting solutions for local and global challenges. Education, too, has undergone a quiet transformation. The focus is shifting from rote memorization to critical thinking, creativity, and adaptability. Students are being encouraged to explore interdisciplinary fields, combining technology with humanities, engineering with sustainability, and art with data science. Universities and private institutions are partnering with industries to ensure learning remains relevant to real-world needs. This alignment between education and enterprise is steadily building a workforce that is not just employable but future-ready. Equally significant is the change in cultural attitude. For decades, stability and security were the ultimate goals for most Indian families. Today, risk-taking and innovation have entered the mainstream. Parents who once urged their children to seek safe government jobs now celebrate them for becoming entrepreneurs or creators. The narrative of success has shifted from employment to empowerment. This change in mindset has unlocked a level of creativity and confidence that fuels India's leap into the global arena. India's youth are also deeply connected to global issues. They think beyond borders, advocate for climate responsibility, and demand sustainability from the industries they work for and the products they consume. This generation is not only ambitious, but also conscious, balancing material aspirations with moral awareness. Their drive to create an inclusive and sustainable future gives India a competitive edge, especially as global industries seek partners who can blend growth with responsibility. The social fabric of India has been reshaped by this generational energy. The traditional divides of class, caste, and geography are being eroded by shared ambition. A student in a small village can compete on equal footing with one in a major city, thanks to digital connectivity and affordable education. This democratization of opportunity is perhaps India's most transformative shift. It is turning a population once seen as a challenge into a coordinated force for innovation, progress, and prosperity. This demographic surge, however, is not without its pressures. The challenge of providing meaningful employment and ensuring equitable access to resources remains immense. But what differentiates India in 2026 is the way its youth perceive challenges as opportunities waiting to be seized. They are rewriting the nation's destiny not through inheritance but through effort, proving that the true wealth of a country lies not in its natural resources or its institutions, but in the restless, determined and unyielding spirit of its people. India's manufacturing renaissance in 2026 is not merely a chapter in its economic story, but a reawakening of its industrial identity. For years, India was viewed primarily as a services-driven economy, a global powerhouse that thrived on software exports while relying heavily on imports for physical goods. But as global dynamics began to shift and as supply chains fractured under the weight of geopolitical tensions, India saw an opening, a moment to reposition itself as the factory of the future. The Make in India vision, once dismissed by skeptics as overly ambitious, began to mature into a tangible reality through persistence, policy evolution, and the determination of a nation ready to prove its industrial might. The transformation began with infrastructure. Roads, ports, railways, and logistics networks were upgraded at a scale and speed the world had not seen from India before. The government's emphasis on improving connectivity and reducing bureaucratic friction started attracting major global manufacturers looking for stability and scale beyond China. Industrial corridors connecting cities and states emerged as lifelines for commerce, enabling faster movement of goods and lowering the cost of production. Smart industrial parks, powered by renewable energy and digital monitoring, became symbols of India's industrial modernization. Foreign investment played a vital role, but what set India apart was the rise of indigenous capability. Indian companies began not only assembling products, but designing and manufacturing entire ecosystems around them, in sectors like electronics, automotive, pharmaceuticals, and defense. Indian manufacturers moved up the value chain, from contract work to innovation, led production. The automobile industry, once dependent on foreign expertise, began exporting electric vehicles and components to Europe and Southeast Asia. In renewable energy equipment, Indian firms became leading suppliers of solar modules and battery technology, helping the world transition to cleaner power while building a self-reliant industrial foundation at home. Technology served as the backbone of this renaissance. The integration of artificial intelligence, robotics, and the Internet of Things into manufacturing lines gave India an edge in precision, quality, and efficiency. Smart factories began to emerge where human skill and digital intelligence worked seamlessly together. Data analytics optimized production, reduced waste, and improved competitiveness. The narrative shifted from low-cost labor to smart production, signaling to the world that India was no longer competing merely on affordability, but on capability and innovation. The spirit of entrepreneurship also found its way into manufacturing. Startups began entering spaces traditionally dominated by large corporations, bringing agility and innovation into fields such as consumer electronics, agri-equipment, and medical devices. Government schemes supporting micro, small, and medium enterprises empowered these ventures with access to funding, mentorship, and global exposure. The synergy between startups and established industries created a new kind of industrial ecosystem, one that valued creativity as much as capital. As the global economy adjusted to China's slowdown and supply chain vulnerabilities, India emerged as a reliable alternative. Global corporations sought diversification, and India's vast labor force, democratic governance, and improving infrastructure made it an ideal partner. International trade agreements and policy reforms further simplified business operations, creating an environment where investment translated quickly into output. India's manufacturing exports began to climb, not as a coincidence, but as the outcome of deliberate strategic effort. Equally important was the rise of sustainability within Indian manufacturing. Conscious of global environmental goals, India's industries began adopting cleaner production techniques, reducing emissions, and investing in circular economy models, factories powered by solar energy, waste, recycling systems integrated into production, and zero-emission industrial clusters became points of pride. This shift toward green manufacturing not only attracted environmentally aware investors, but also positioned India as a responsible industrial power in a climate-conscious world. This manufacturing revival also had profound social implications. It created millions of jobs, revived dormant towns, and infused rural areas with industrial activity. Training centers and apprenticeship programs bridged the skill gap. allowing the youth to participate directly in the new industrial wave. Women, too, began playing a larger role in manufacturing sectors, driven by inclusive policies and changing workplace norms. The factories of 2026 were not just centers of production, but symbols of progress and participation. What made this renaissance truly remarkable was its timing. As other nations faced stagnation and contraction, India harnessed its momentum with clarity of purpose. The nation understood that manufacturing was not just about producing goods, it was about producing confidence, self-reliance, and global relevance. The Make in India mission evolved from a slogan into a shared vision, transforming an entire generation's perception of what India could achieve when innovation met intent. China's economic slowdown in 2026 marked one of the most defining moments in global history, sending ripples through markets and reshaping the balance of power across continents. For decades, China had been the engine of global growth, the workshop of the world, and the model of rapid industrialization, but beneath the glittering skylines and manufacturing might, cracks had begun to form, cracks born from overextension, demographic decline, and the natural limits of a system built on relentless expansion. When those pressures finally surfaced, the shock was not confined to China alone. It echoed across the global economy, forcing nations to reassess their dependencies and opening new opportunities for emerging powers. Among them, India stood ready, not merely as a spectator to China's stumble, but as a contender rising to claim the momentum. The roots of China's slowdown were both structural and systemic. Years of rapid urbanization had left behind ghost cities and mounting debt, as state-backed projects outpaced real demand. The population, once China's greatest asset, had begun to age faster than expected. Labor shortages and rising wages eroded the cost advantage that had made China the world's factory. At the same time, political tensions, trade wars, and shifts in global alliances began isolating Chinese industries from Western markets. The once unstoppable growth engine was forced to decelerate, revealing vulnerabilities that had long been hidden beneath layers of state control and global optimism. As multinational corporations faced disruptions in their supply chains, they began seeking stability elsewhere. India, with its vast workforce, democratic framework, and improving infrastructure, emerged as the most promising destination for diversification. Global investors, who once poured capital into Chinese manufacturing zones, started redirecting their focus toward Indian industrial corridors and start-up ecosystems. The slowdown in China became the acceleration point for India's rise, catalyzing an era of economic realignment in which the world began to perceive India not as an alternative, but as the next frontier. For India, this moment was not about exploiting another nation's struggle, but about capitalizing on its own preparation. Over the previous decade, India had been steadily laying the groundwork for self-reliance, expanding its domestic manufacturing base, reforming labor laws, and embracing digitalization in governance and business. These reforms, once viewed as gradual and cautious, suddenly appeared visionary. India's ability to balance growth with openness, innovation with regulation, positioned it as a reliable partner in a world seeking stability amid uncertainty. The geopolitical landscape began to reflect this shift. Nations wary of overdependence on China began strengthening trade ties with India, signing agreements that prioritized collaboration in technology, energy, and defense. Supply chains once routed through Chinese ports started flowing through Indian logistics hubs. The global narrative, once dominated by China's ascent, began to include India's resilience and adaptability. This redistribution of trust reshaped global commerce, giving India an economic leverage it had never experienced before. China's domestic challenges also carried lessons for India. Observing the pitfalls of over-centralization and debt-driven growth, Indian policymakers focused on sustainability and inclusivity rather than replicating China's model. India forged its own, one that balanced economic expansion with social empowerment. Investments were directed not only toward infrastructure and industry, but also toward human capital, ensuring that growth translated into tangible improvement in people's lives. This period also witnessed a psychological shift in global perception. For years, China's growth had been viewed as inevitable, its model seen as superior in efficiency and control. But as its momentum faltered, the world's faith in authoritarian-driven progress began to waver. India's democratic, diverse, and sometimes chaotic model, once criticized as slow and indecisive, began to appear more sustainable. The transparency, adaptability, and decentralized nature of India's economy became strengths in a world learning the dangers of rigidity. The China shock, as economists termed it, did not dismantle the global order, it rebalanced it. And in that rebalancing, India found its place not as a replacement, but as a necessary partner in the evolution of global growth. The world realized that economic power was no longer the privilege of a single nation, but a shared responsibility across emerging economies. India's rise during China's slowdown became a story of timing and readiness, where patience met opportunity and where preparation turned potential into performance. The technological revolution unfolding in India by 2026 became the heartbeat of its transformation, a wave of innovation that reached into every corner of society and industry. What began as a digital awakening in the previous decade matured into a full-fledged ecosystem of technology-driven progress. India was no longer merely a consumer of global technology. It had become a creator, a hub of invention and adaptation. This revolution was not confined to the gleaming towers of Bengaluru or Hyderabad. It extended deep into villages, schools, hospitals, and factories, weaving a digital fabric that connected 1 billion lives in real time. At the center of this movement was the country's mastery of digital infrastructure. The success of platforms such as Aadhaar, UP, and Digital India laid the groundwork for what became one of the most inclusive technological expansions in modern history. The unification of identity, banking, and connectivity allowed every citizen to participate in the economy with unprecedented ease. From small vendors to multinational corporations, digital payment systems became the bloodstream of commerce. The cashless economy was no longer a distant goal, but a daily reality. This digital backbone not only improved efficiency, but also enhanced transparency, reducing corruption and empowering citizens with direct access to government services. Artificial intelligence, automation, and data analytics became the new engines of growth. Indian startups and research institutions began producing breakthroughs in machine learning applications tailored to the nation's unique challenges. AI-powered platforms optimized agriculture, predicting weather patterns and soil conditions to help farmers increase yield. In healthcare, data-driven models enabled early disease detection and personalized treatment, bridging the gap between rural clinics and advanced hospitals. The education sector embraced virtual classrooms and AI tutors, ensuring that even in remote regions, children had access to quality learning resources. These innovations were not imported. They were homegrown, shaped by the realities of India's diverse landscape. India's software legacy evolved into something deeper, a fusion of software and hardware innovation. Domestic companies began producing affordable drones, sensors, and IoT devices that powered industries from logistics to smart cities. The collaboration between public and private sectors accelerated this growth, with government-supported tech hubs nurturing start-ups working on frontier technologies like quantum computing, blockchain, and clean tech solutions. The vision was not just to digitize India, but to make it a global center of technological thought leadership. The private sector played a pivotal role in this revolution. Indian tech giants began competing on the global stage, acquiring foreign firms, exporting digital services, and setting new standards for cybersecurity, fintech, and cloud infrastructure. The India Stack became a model adopted by other developing nations, seeking to replicate India's blend of accessibility and innovation. Technology became an instrument of diplomacy. As India's digital frameworks were shared with allies in Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East, creating a new form of soft power built on collaboration. Rather than competition, the human element of this revolution was equally striking. Millions of young Indians equipped with coding skills and digital literacy became architects of their own futures. Technology training programs, online boot camps, and government partnerships with tech companies ensured that the benefits of the digital age were not confined to the privileged. The line between rural and urban innovation began to blur. Entrepreneurs from small towns launched global apps, local artisans found markets abroad through e-commerce, and citizens used mobile platforms to access health, education, and legal services once beyond their reach. Cybersecurity and digital ethics also emerged as vital components of India's technological journey. As the digital ecosystem expanded, the nation took deliberate steps to protect user data, regulate AI responsibly, and maintain the integrity of its digital systems. This balance between innovation and regulation allowed India to avoid many of the pitfalls that other nations faced when technology outpaced governance. The cultural impact of this transformation was profound. Technology began shaping how Indians interacted, worked, and even dreamed. A generation that once viewed technology as a tool now saw it as a companion. The democratization of access empowered individuals to transcend traditional limitations, creating a society where knowledge and opportunity were no longer bound by geography or privilege. The spirit of innovation became a shared language across generations, professions, and regions. This technological leap was not just about devices or data. It was about reimagining what a nation could achieve when its people and technology moved in harmony. India's ability to combine human intelligence with digital innovation allowed it to redefine its global identity, moving from a participant in the digital age to one of its architects.